Hi and welcome to another story, and today we have part 7 of The Danger Gang by Tom Fletcher, continuing from page 310, October. Dear Danny, you won't believe what happened in Freaky this month. I mean, it's strange enough here at the best of times, but throw Halloween into the mix and this place is off the scale. Freaky has an annual pumpkin competition to see who can grow the biggest one. Susie, who lives over the road from me at number 8, well, her mum and dad grow massive pumpkins and enter every year. They're easily the best in town. The trouble is, they just can't agree on how to grow the best and biggest pumpkin. Mr. Prune thinks you need to plant them in a bucket and water them with a watering can. Mrs. Prune thinks they grow bigger if you plant them in the greenhouse and use a spray bottle to water them. Neither of them will budge on their pumpkin growing plans, so they now enter the pumpkin competition separately, which means each year only one of them gets to win the trophy. Susie said that this year her dad was feeling super confident about his pumpkin. Apparently he's got something pretty special up his sleeve. The trouble is, Susie's mum said that she has something pretty special up her sleeve this year too. It's Susie I feel sorry for, because her mum and dad spend more time with their precious pumpkins than they do with their daughter. To make things even worse, over the past few weeks, both of them have been so obsessed with watering, pruning, trimming, and whatever else you do with pumpkins to make them grow that neither Mr. nor Mrs. Prune remembered Susie's birthday. The pumpkin competition was held on Halloween night. I went trick-or-treating first with Dad before meeting the gang at Freaky Square. Everyone had awesome Halloween costumes. Everyone except me. Dad, as usual, forgot that it was his job to get my Halloween costume ready, so 5 minutes before we left the house, he fashioned this costume together with things he found in the kitchen. A spatula, red tea towel, another spatula, count spatula. I know what you're thinking. Why do my parents need 3 spatulas? And I'm afraid I don't have an answer to that. Needless to say, I removed the costume the first chance I got and found the rest of the Danger Gang near the front of the crowd that had gathered in Freaky Square. Nice costumes, I said as Molly made her entire head disappear, terrifying a group of Year 3 kids. Jamelia had come as the Freaky Freybug, complete with glowing green eyes, swimming goggles with glow-in-the-dark paint. Katie showed up as a mermaid from Freaky Falls, in a wiry green wig and homemade tail. Eric had a cardboard shark head, so no one would notice the difference if it rained and he turned into an actual shark. Charlie came covered in rubbish and said he was a creaker, and everyone thought Ronnie's Frankenstein mask was super realistic until they realised he wasn't actually wearing a mask. Okay, that's probably a bit mean. Frankenstein's monster is way better looking than Ronnie Nutbog. Where's Susie? I asked, realising she was the only one of our Danger Gang missing, but no one had seen her. When it was time for the pumpkin unveiling, 3 very important-looking officials came out and introduced themselves as the judging panel. Piers Snorgan of the telly was there, reporting with his film crew, so I'm one step closer to being rich and famous. I slipped away from the gang to look for Susie and found her hiding round the back of the stage. Hey, they're about to start the judging, I said. Great, she said with a sigh, and then took a huge bite out of a huge slice of pumpkin pie. What's up? I asked. I'm just bored of watching Mum and Dad try to undo each other with stupid orange delicious pumpkins, she said, taking another gulp of stupid orange delicious pumpkin pie. Want some? She asked. I shook my head. No thanks, I'm stuffed. Mum's bought a box of 12 donuts for trick-or-treaters, and I accidentally ate 7 when she wasn't looking, but I guess one of your parents is about to win the big trophy. That's pretty cool, right? Yeah, that's awesome for one of them, but that means the other one's going to lose, she said. Oh yeah, that sucks, I realised, as Susie gobbled another mouthful of pumpkin pie. I'd slow down if I were you, or you'll turn into a pumpkin, I joked as she scoffed the pie. Well, at least Mum and Dad might notice me then, she laughed and finished off the gooey orange slice of pie. We both headed back then to watch the unveiling. There were 7 entries in total, including Miss Tinky and the man who sells the Nutter Crunchers from his ice cream van, but it was clear to everyone that the only 2 people who stood a chance of winning were Susie's parents. First up was Susie's mum's pumpkin. It was so big it had to be carried out on a forklift truck. The freaky crowd burst into applause. All the judges were scribbling notes on their clipboards, nodding their heads, and Mrs. Prune was beaming. Piers Snorgan announced, in my opinion, this has to be the winning pumpkin, because this has to be the biggest pumpkin in the world. In fact, unless anyone can prove that pumpkins can grow on other planets, this also has to be the biggest pumpkin in the universe. But as usual, the opinion turned out to be utter rubbish. The ground started to rumble, and searchlights suddenly lit up the dusky sky, and found something enormous, something round, something orange, flying through the air, being hoisted in by a giant crane over the rooftops and trees. Susie sighed. Here comes my dad's pumpkin, and we all looked up in amazement. Freaky went nuts. Everyone threw their trick-or-treat bags into the air in celebration as the second gigantic pumpkin was lowered into place next to Mrs. Prune's entry. Mr. Prune was looking very smug and avoiding his wife's glare. Piers Snorgan ran over to get an exclusive interview with the Prunes. "Mr. Prune, how on earth did you manage to grow a pumpkin this big? What's your secret?" Piers asked. "Well, I planted it a little earlier than usual this year, back in March, on the night of the big storm," Mr. Prune answered. "And what about you, Mrs. Prune?" demanded Piers. "So did I," she replied. The moment I heard that, my heart stopped. Storm? If that storm had anything to do with these pumpkins, then we were in for something freaky. "Well, I think for the first time ever we have a tie," said Piers Snorgan, looking at the two equally enormous pumpkins. "You are just winners, and can share the Freaky Pumpkin Competition trophy." "Hold on just a tick," screeched Mrs. Prune. "My pumpkin is clearly the biggest." "Don't be daft," Mr. Prune added. "Your silly little pumpkin is nowhere near as big as mine." Then Mrs. Prune reached into her gardening utility belt and unclipped a bottle of spray, which I could see was full of a murky green liquid labelled rainwater. "What's that?" Mr. Prune asked. "This is the water I collected from the storm on the night my pumpkin was planted," said Mrs. Prune. "And what are you going to do with that?" Mr. Prune asked, sounding a little nervous. "I don't think mine has finished growing yet," Mrs. Prune screeched, and with that she went to spray her pumpkin with the freaky storm water. "Oh, no, you don't. That's cheating," cried Mr. Prune, and he lunged for the bottle. He tugged it this way, and his wife pulled it that way. This way, that way. It was a tug of war. "I can't watch this," Susie said miserably, and she took a large bite from another piece of pumpkin pie. At that very moment, the spray bottle full of freaky storm water couldn't take being pulled any longer. Pop! It snapped open and pinged out of Susie's mum and dad's hands. It flew through the air, soaking poor Susie with the murky water inside. Susie gasped as water dripped from her hair in cloves. I could tell this was the final straw. "That's enough," she screamed. "I've had it with you two and this stupid competition." As Susie shouted, I couldn't help but notice the green sparks, like tiny bolts of lightning, that zapped around her body. I whispered to myself, "It's danger time." And I was right. You spend so much time watching your silly little pumpkins grow that you didn't even notice that I grew a whole year, Susie went on. "Oh, Susie Pye, your birthday," Mrs. Prune gasped. "You forgot her birthday?" asked Mr. Prune, looking at his wife in horror. "You did too, Dad," bellowed Susie. "Did I?" he said. But while Susie's mum and dad had failed to remember her growing another year older, I had definitely not failed to notice that she seemed to be growing now, right before our very eyes. Yes, you read that correctly. Susie was growing. "Susie, you're getting bigger," Ronnie shouted. "And your skin is turning orange," added Katie. And it was. Susie wasn't just plumping up like someone was inflating her with a bike pump. She was actually turning orange. Bigger and bigger, rounder and rounder, until she was as big as her mum and dad's prize-winning pumpkins, and the same colour too. "My Susie Pye," Mr. Prune cried. You're a pumpkin!" Her mum screamed at Susie's round orange face, poking out of the top of an even rounder, more orange body. The whole town started screaming and running for their lives. "Pumpkin monster!" they cried. "Killer super squash!" they yelled. Susie, the now giant pumpkin, lifted up one of her ginormous pumpkin feet and took a stomping pumpkin step forward. Boom! The ground shook. It was like watching one of those old films where Godzilla fights those awesome giant monsters in the middle of the city. If Godzilla had to fight Pumpkin Susie, I'm not sure who would win. "Susie Pye, we can fix you!" Mr. Prune cried. "Yes, your dad is brilliant at making pumpkins small," Mrs. Prune said. "Oi! Well, you are," she replied. "Stop arguing about pumpkins," Susie bellowed, and with that she lifted up her heavy orange foot and brought it crashing down on top of her mum's prize-worthy pumpkin. Splat! The pumpkin was pulverised, and chunks of orange flesh splattered over the watching, chaotic crowd. "Ha ha ha," Mr. Prune cackled at the sight. "Looks like the trophy is all mine this year." But giant pumpkin Susie had different plans. She lifted up her other round orange foot and squashed and smashed her dad's pumpkin to bits. Smash! Now, I'm not sure exactly what happened next, but the moment those pumpkins were smashed open, it was almost as if a spell had been broken. Just like when a hypnotist snaps his fingers and wakes someone up who's been prancing around like a chicken a moment before, Mr. and Mrs. Prune instantly changed. "Oh, my Susie Pye," said Mrs. Prune. Big girl," sobbed Mr. Prune. They both wrapped their arms around their little big pumpkin girl's legs and cried and cried and cried. and as their teardrops trickled down their cheeks and onto the orange flesh of their pumpkin girl, some sort of magic transformation began. Instead of watering a plant to make it grow, their tears were making Susie shrink. Down, down, down she went, getting smaller and smaller and less orange, until Susie was Susie again. "Oh, Susie Pie!" Mr. and Mrs. Prune cheered. Susie was back, but now we had another problem. A bigger problem. Everyone in Freaky had just seen giant pumpkin Susie stomping around town like a monster from one of those old B movies. There was no way we were going to be able to keep this secret within the Danger Gang. And not only that, Piers Snorgan and his TV crew were there. This was going to go viral. "She's done for," Charlie whispered as the Danger Gang reconvened. "She'll be taken away for all sorts of scientific testing, for sure," said Molly. "Or locked up for being a danger to society," added Ronnie. As Piers Snorgan and the crew rushed over to her, we all thought this might be the last we'd ever see of our friend Susie Prune. But Piers suddenly burst into hysterical laughter, clapping and cheering wildly. "Young lady, that was the best Halloween costume I have ever seen," he roared. "I don't know how on earth you made it, but what a treat it was. Or was it a trick? But ha ha ha!" The stunned crowd, who had been screaming in terror moments before, suddenly erupted into applause. I looked around at the Danger Gang, and we all joined in cheering. "Whoopee! What a costume!" we cried. "Looked fake to me," Ronnie heckled. "Yeah, you could see the zip," Eric laughed. "Didn't believe it for a second," Katie yelled. I think everyone here can safely say that you, Susie Prune, were the biggest pumpkin any of us have ever seen. Piers Snorgan chuckled as he pinned the first place rosette on her jumper. And there's no way a Halloween costume like that was made without the help of Mum and Dad, so I suppose the joint winners of this year's Freaky Pumpkin Prize are Mr. and Mrs. Prune. I felt the Danger Gang breathe a sigh of relief, and we said nothing else about it until we were safely within the wooden walls of the treehouse later that evening. So that was my freaky Halloween. But to be honest, I expected nothing less. Happy trick-or-treating, Frankie. P.S. Photographic evidence. Take a look at the picture of Mr. and Mrs. Prune with their winning entry, Susie. Notice anything unusual? Count the people. Then count the shadows. Someone else was there. Danny, I'm in trouble. Something really mega super freakishly freaky has happened, and I don't think I'm going to make it. This is my final letter, my last goodbye, and there's something you need to know. There's no easy way to say this, but I love you, Danny. I knew you were the one for me since the day we first met, and I caught you eating your bogey at the back of the classroom. It was love at first bite. Don't try to save me, and whatever you do, don't come to Freaky. It's too dangerous here, maybe even for the Danger Gang. Frankie, over and out. November. Dear Danny, how funny was my last letter? You know I wasn't being serious, right? I'm such a joker these days. What am I like? I was all, I love you and stuff. Totally not true. I mean, you're cool and everything and still my best friend. But I have been in love with you since the second we met. Of course not. Remembered every detail of your smile, as if. Do I know the specific shape of the 8 tiny moles on your face that you hate but I think are awesome? Nice. I didn't even know you had 8 moles. We're just mates, all right? Anyway, according to your last letter, which I've just read, you have a boyfriend now. That's so great. I'm really happy for you. Have you held his hand yet? Not that I care or anything. I just wanted to know because we're friends. My last letter was mostly jokes about me loving you, but something freakishly freaky actually did happen, and I wasn't sure if I was going to make it. I'd better tell you what happened. I was in class, about to write the date on top of the page, when, through the classroom window, I saw a van pulling up in the school car park. It looked like an ordinary van, but something about the logo on the side felt really familiar. Then I remembered the name, Shadow Tech. It was the science company my mum used to work for before they fired her. I thought it was weird that they were in the car park of my new school, and then I saw a man get out and open the back of the van. From the classroom, I couldn't get a good look at the face. It was half in shadow, and he was wearing really dark sunglasses and covered up his features. In November. Suspicious, right? If there was ever a guy who was up to no good, it was this one. He looked just like Dr. Vendetta. Seriously, my heart stopped when I saw him. I was like, no way. And then my brain was like, chill out, Frankie. Dr. Vendetta isn't real. And I was like, oh yeah, thanks. But this guy was so obviously a baddie that I quickly drew this sketch of him, in case I needed it for evidence later. He had jet black hair, slicked back, sunglasses to hide his face, the best disguise, earpiece to communicate with other baddies, really smart suit, fingerless gloves. All bad guys wear those. See what I mean? He's 100% a bad guy. I could just tell. But what was he doing in Freaky? Suddenly my mind started to piece things together, like it was doing a puzzle. Mum gets fired from a tech company. Mum moves away from tech company. Mum gets new job at school in new town. Tech company shows up at new school in new town. Which can only mean one thing. Shadow Tech must be looking for Mum. Then I remembered those weird shadows I'd been seeing all year, and the feeling that I was being watched. What if Shadow Tech had been spying on me? Well, not on me, but on Mum and her inventions. Now, I'm no expert, but if I was a tech company, I wouldn't be bothered about the kid shutter-upper or the husband-oh-shh. I would, however, be extremely interested in a device that would control the weather. A device that was sitting in our garage. What if, and you'll have to go with me on this, Danny, what if Shadow Tech was actually not a very nice company? Mum did say that some of the people were trouble and not to be trusted. In fact, what if they were evil? And what if this evil company realised they could use Mum's weather zapping invention to take control of the planet's weather systems? Think about it. If Shadow Tech could control the weather, they could probably use the weather rays, weather zapping technology for their own evil ends. Now, I don't know exactly what evil ends Shadow Tech have yet, but if the guy in the car park who looked just like Dr. Vendetta is anything to go by, it's probably taking over the world or blowing up the moon or destroying all the donut bakeries. Yeah, that would probably be the worst one. Ridding the world of donuts. While I was doodling that awesome picture, I kept one eye on the Shadow Tech guy and saw him walk around the other side of the van. But when he appeared at the back, he had changed. And I'm not talking about his clothes, I mean, he had transformed. And I'm not talking about into a werewolf or anything. This is real life, Danny. The Shadow Tech baddie had become a shadow. At first, I thought he was waiting on the other side of the van, but then I saw it. The clear, dark shadow of him, with no person attached to it. I had just seen proof that some shadows, those shadows I've been seeing all year, were real. They were this guy, I told you. Don't ask me how he transformed into a shadow in the first place. I don't have the foggiest idea. But Mum used to say that all sorts of weird technology was invented at Shadow Tech. And since Shadow is in their name, I guess they've got some super awesome baddie gadget that can transform them at the swish of a wand. No, wait, that's wizards. A flick of a switch? Yeah, that's more like it. A Shadow Maker 3000. That's what I'd call it. Wish I had one of those. But why was this shadow now dashing through the school car park? I watched it scurry around the cars and zip across the empty spaces and head straight towards the main entrance. I had to rub my eyes to check I wasn't imagining things, because it was super weird seeing someone's shadow when the someone wasn't there. If Shadow Tech were after one of my mum's inventions, and one of them was here in Freaky, at my school, then they must know that Mum works here. I had to warn her. I put my hand up and asked to go to the loo, but Miss Tinky said what she always says. You should have gone before my class started, Frankie Brown. Hold it in. So annoying. That shadow was getting away. Please, Miss Tinky, I begged. No, but I'll wet myself. If you must. My friends were staring at me now. They must have been wondering what I was up to. But there just wasn't time to explain. I'm ashamed to admit it, but I genuinely tried to pee my pants, just a little bit, although enough so that she'd send me to Lost Property to get some new trousers. But I couldn't do it. I didn't need to pee. When you gotta go, you gotta go. And when you don't, you just don't. I needed another way to get out of class, and fast, so I did something dangerous, seriously dangerous. Sticking out of Ronnie's jacket pocket was a can of apple fizz-splosion, his very favourite fizzy drink. Those things were loaded with sugar, and there's no way anyone's parents would let kids drink them, including Ronnie's, which is why he always had one secretly stashed away in his jacket pocket so he could take little sips when Miss Tinky wasn't looking. I could see that he hadn't opened it yet, but I knew wouldn't be long before he did, so I accidentally dropped my pencil on the floor and gave a little nudge towards Ronnie's desk with my foot. I quietly walked over to it, and as I crouched down to pick it up, I whispered, "It's danger time." Then I secretly slipped the apple fizz-splosion out of Ronnie's pocket and shook it. It wasn't just any old shake. I really went for it, Danny. And when I was done, I managed to slip it back into the jacket pocket without Ronnie noticing a thing. I sat back at my seat and waited, and got bored of waiting, so I used my special mind powers and planted an idea in Ronnie's head. I leaned back casually in my seat and said to my gang, I'm thirsty. Is anyone else thirsty? Quiet, please, Frankie Brown, called Miss Tinky. OK. It wasn't quite Jedi mind trick worthy, but it worked. A few moments later, Ronnie checked Miss Tinky wasn't looking and reached for the can in his pocket. Psst! You might want to hide under your desk for a second, I whispered to Eric. Why? He replied. Just trust me, I said, putting my hand on my head like a shark fin. Oh, He nodded and slid under his desk just as Ronnie slipped the can out of his pocket, placed his fingernail under the ring and boom! Let's just say that Apple Fizzplosion lived up to its name. The explosion was colossal. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. It was on the ceiling and everything. Most importantly, though, we were all soaked apart from Eric, thanks to my warning. Me, Molly, Charlie, Jamelia, Susie, Katie, and of course Ronnie. It worked! Go and get dried off, all of you, and then I will need an explanation, Miss Tinky told us crossly, and we marched out of the classroom, along with a totally dry Eric who was pretending to wring out his shirt. The second we were in the corridor, Charlie said, "What was that all about?" "It was my fault," I explained. "I shook up the can of Apple Fizzplosion. I'm really sorry, but I had to do it. Something's happening, and I think my mum might be in danger. Remember those weird shadows we've all been seeing?" Quickly, I explained what I had spotted out of the classroom window. Luckily, the idea of being on a top-secret mission to warn my mum that a mysterious evil shadow agent was in the school to try and steal one of her inventions stopped Ronnie from boshing me on the nose, although I do have to buy him a new can of Apple Fizzplosion. We ran through the corridors and got into the science lab, just in time to spot a dark shadow entering the classroom and the door closing behind it. I don't know if my friends had completely believed me up until they saw the shadow for themselves, because suddenly they weren't so keen on being involved in my top-secret mission to try to intercept an evil shadow agent. I could see that they were all nervous. Katie was biting her lip, Ronnie had gone very pale, and Molly was twitching her nose like a frightened rabbit. Suddenly, I realised what Molly was doing. Turning herself invisible. "Great idea, Molly," I whispered. "Once you're invisible, you can sneak into my mum's class and see if you can find that shadow tech shadow." Everyone else agreed, although I think it was mainly because of if Molly did it, then we wouldn't have to. "What are you lot going to do?" she asked. "We'll watch through the window," I replied. So we did, and I'll admit that watching an invisible girl spy on a shadow isn't the most exciting thing I've ever seen. Yawn. But just when I was starting to doubt whether or not I had really seen an evil shadow agent, the bell rang for lunch break, and all the kids rushed out of Mum's classroom. Molly reappeared in the crowd, heading to the cafeteria. "I saw the shadow steal something from your mum's desk," she whispered. "What was it?" I asked. Just before Molly could answer, Mum was standing next to us. "What are you doing here? Is everything okay?" she asked. I was about to tell her the truth. I really was, but instead I said, "Yep, everything's fine." Because right at that moment, over Mum's shoulder, Eric was pointing at something. It was the shadow, slinking away, and I instantly realised what he'd stolen from her desk. Mum's house keys. It was so freaky, because Mum's house keys weren't floating in the air. He wasn't invisible like Molly. The other shadow, the actual shadow, was holding the keys. It was like the shadow was alive. I quickly waved goodbye to Mum and sprinted through the hallways, chasing after the shadow with the footsteps of my friends close behind me. He must have known we were after him because the shadow started to run. And as he ran, the keys slid across the floor, then up the wall, sometimes even on the ceiling, depending on where the shadow went. Then we got lucky. As the shadow shot around a corner, Mum's keys caught on a coat hook. "I've got him!" Ronnie yelled as he grabbed the dangling keys. Then all of a sudden the hallway grew very dark. It was like the shadow was expanding, growing, covering everything. "Run!" We ran as fast as we could, throwing the keys to each other whenever we felt shadowy hands reaching for us. Just as I sensed the shadowy hands getting close to me, I threw the keys across the hallway, but Susie missed them and they slid under the door to the girls' toilets. The shadow instantly made his way towards the cubicles and started flinging the doors open, one by one. I thought Molly was done for, but when the shadow got to her door and pushed it open, Molly was gone. She'd managed to turn invisible just in time. Unfortunately, Mum's keys weren't invisible and were sitting on the toilet seat. So the shadow baddie snatched them up and shot straight past us, back into the corridor. We chased him, but soon lost him in the crowd of kids coming out for their lunch break. "I need to get home," I said. "Tell Miss Tinky I wasn't feeling well or something." "No way, I'm coming with you," said Eric. "So am I," Molly nodded. "Me too," agreed Katie. "Me three," laughed Susie. "Wouldn't miss it," Charlie grinned. "Count me in," Jamelia said. "I guess it's better than school," Ronnie sighed. "Are you sure? I mean, it could be dangerous," I warned them. "Danger? Then we're definitely coming. We're the Danger Gang, aren't we?" said Susie. "Exactly," cheered Charlie. "Danger Gang!" We hopped on our bikes and left lunchtime at school behind, which was so bad but so much fun. The November sky was already starting to darken at the edges like a photo with some seriously moody filter on it. Our handlebars were as cold as Nutter Crunch, and the wind whistled like ghosts in the trees as we pedalled through our secret shortcut back to Strike Lane. It was like a scene from a kind of movies our parents didn't let us watch in case we got funny ideas. But they don't realise that those movies get all their funny ideas from kids like us. The plan was as follows. Go home, stop Shadowtech from stealing the weather ray, and get back in school before lunch break was over, or we'd all be in serious trouble. The problem was, riding our bikes was so much fun that we sort of forgot about the plan and stopped for donuts. My totally brilliant idea, of course. Then we went to the cinema, played at the arcade, went bowling, then ice skating, and back for more donuts. My awesome idea again, before we realised it was totally dark and we missed the whole of the afternoon school. By the time we got to my house, the police were there, and my suspicions were proved right. It was the weather ray the Shadow had been after, and it was gone. It was in the hands of Shadowtech now. As we crept inside, Mum was giving a statement to a police officer about the break-in, and Dad was looking sheepish in the corner. It turns out that Dad was home, looking after Max when the burglary happened, but didn't hear it because he was asleep. When the police officer asked if anything valuable had been taken, and if she had any idea who it could have been, Mum said, "No, just one of my useless inventions that doesn't even work. I'm quite glad to be rid of it, to be honest. It was starting to smell like old nappies." Mum called someone to change the locks, and the gang all headed home. That evening, we ate dinner, as if nothing had happened. As though an evil company trying to take over the world, probably, destroy the moon, maybe, and blow up every donut bakery, possibly, hadn't just stolen an invention that had the ability to control the weather. I guess Mum and Dad didn't know what we knew about Shadowtech being in Freaky, though. They just thought it had been a random thief. As if. The Danger Gang all met up in the treehouse later for an official debrief, but the day had been so freaky that we just sat in silence. It was then that my brain started itching a bit, like I'd missed something important, and the smart person inside my head was screaming at me, but I wasn't listening. I wasn't sure what it was, but I couldn't help thinking it might have something to do with what Mum had said to the police earlier. Her voice kept echoing in my mind. Just one of my useless inventions. It was starting to smell like old nappies. Old nappies. I had no idea why I kept thinking about that. What I did know was that if Shadowtech was planning to destroy donuts or take over the world with Mum's weather ray, then there was only one group of kids that could stop them. The Danger Gang. So I came up with a new idea. We were going to take back the weather ray. I'm not sure how we're going to do this yet, but whatever we do will be top secret, so don't tell anyone, including your nosy sister and your new boyfriend. Write back soon, if you're not too busy holding hands. Frankie. P.S. I'm really happy for you because you're my best friend and I'm not in love with you. And that is where we will leave part 7 of The Danger Gang by Tom Fletcher. I'll be back soon with the next part of this fantastic story and lots more stories and videos coming your way very soon. If you'd like to subscribe or hit a like, that's always appreciated. Thanks for listening, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.